As the war enters its third week in Iran, Donald Trump said U.S. forces obliterated Iranian military targets on Kharg Island. It's also known as the Forbidden Island due to strict military control, located around 30 kilometers off the mainland. Now, sites related to the oil were reportedly not hit, but Donald Trump threatened to strike those too if Iran continues to block shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. Peter O'Brien reports.
9 in 10 Iranian oil barrels pass through this small patch of land. Kharg Island has continued shipping throughout the American barrage on Iran, spared until Friday night.
At my direction, the United States Central Command executed one of the most powerful bombing raids in the history of the Middle East and totally obliterated every military target in Iran's crown jewel, Kharg Island.
The island in the north of the Persian Gulf is home to vast reservoirs and oil terminals. US leader Donald Trump says those installations were not targeted in the bombing, but threatened to reconsider if Iran interferes with shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. Iranian media also said no oil infrastructure was damaged, reporting hits on military bases, a helicopter hangar, and the airport control tower. Iran's oil exports are its lifeline, and Tehran has threatened a new level of retaliation.
Infrastructure belonging to oil companies across the region that have American shares or cooperate with America will be immediately destroyed and reduced to ashes.
A fifth of the world's oil passes from the Persian Gulf through the Strait of Hormuz in large part to Asia. The passage is mostly closed while Iran launches attacks on neighboring states and threatens to strike tankers. Trump has promised the US Navy will escort ships through the strait. Meanwhile, oil prices continue to skyrocket.
For more, we can speak to our senior reporter, James Andre. Hello to you, James.
Hello.
We saw a little bit of it in that report, but if you can flesh it out, why is Kharg Island so important?
Now, Kharg Island, first, do I explain what it is exactly? Basically, it's an oil hub. Why? Because along the coast of Iran, you don't have that many deep sea ports. But the island is actually set in deep sea. So basically, when it was operating on 100%, you could actually fill up 10 supertankers at a time around the island. So basically, how this works is that you have huge pipelines funneling all the oil from the Iranian coast underwater, and this is where it is being loaded up into these tankers. Now, it accounts for about 6% of the Iranian economy. And as you know, Iranian has been under heavy sanctions for many, many years. So there was a lot of this oil was actually exported, including to China, through shadow fleets of tankers. And it is a major source of revenue, both for the country itself, but also for the regime more directly, because, of course, it was a tool to get this cash from these shadow tankers directly into basically the government. And if you take the figures, it's worth about 50% of the government's spending. So it is a large chunk of the Iranian economy, but it's also a large chunk of the world's oil, basically. So what the Americans have been trying to do by destroying what Donald Trump says are military assets on the island was to obviously get the traffic flowing in the Strait of Hormuz, which is basically controlled by the Iranians for geographic reasons, and they are basically stopping all these tankers. It's 1/5 of the world's oil that goes through the Strait of Hormuz. Obviously, the island here is a lot less, but it's very important for the Iranians and for its customers.
Yeah, what Trump did essentially was sort of like a warning shot saying, if you don't get that traffic moving, I will hit these oil sites. And as you mentioned, the economic interests here are very important for Iran. So we're hearing a lot of fiery rhetoric. What sort of retaliations could Iran be considering at this moment?
Well, what the Iranians have been saying now, first there has been an Iranian official who's spoken to the press, condition of anonymity, who is part of the oil ministry. He has said that basically right now there had been some heavy damage sustained by the oil infrastructure on the island, and that indeed the exports from the island are all but stopped. So it's true that we'll have to see what happens in hours to come if indeed the oil is still being loaded onto these supertankers in days and weeks to come. But what we do know is that what the Iranian government has been saying, they've been saying that they would retaliate on all American interests when it comes to oil production across the Middle East. And it does appear we have started to see this with this drone strike on the United Arab Emirates on this oil terminal by a drone. So there are many, many targets that could be chosen by the Iranians. One in particular could be quite easy to strike, and that we've seen also this morning, that we've seen the Shiite pro-Iranian militia in Iraq, for example, who are claiming an attack on the U.S. embassy. This has not been confirmed by the United States at this stage, but there are witnesses who did see, fire and smoke rising from the embassy. But there are many, many American interests, including in the southern part of Iraq, for example, around big oil fields around Basra. That could be a target. So there is a range of targets that could be indeed used by the Iranians should they choose to strike back. We'll have to see if they have the means to do that and the will to do that.
Yeah, and if they do wage this economic war, or at least intensify it, what are the wider implications?
Well, the wider implications are being felt already. I mean, the price of crude oil has increased 40% since the beginning of this new phase of the war. If you take the prices of oil, they've risen, prices of gas in the United States, they've risen on average of 23.5%. Now, this could have broad implications when it comes to U.S. politics, with the midterms coming up. Now, of course, Donald Trump just brushes this aside, saying that as soon as the war will stop, the prices will tumble down. But it's also having geopolitical implications. For example, if you take the island, of this Iranian island that's been hit, Kharg, it's 13% of the oil imported by China. So you can imagine 13. So that's a lot of oil. What we're also seeing is the US easing sanctions against Russia, saying that they need more oil on the market. This, of course, is great news for the Kremlin. The price of a barrel of Ural oil has risen 30% in the last 48 or 72 hours. They've also lifted restrictions on imports by India. So India is expected to import massive amounts of Russian oil. So what we're talking about here is a revenue for the Russians, thanks to this easing of sanctions, of about $150 million per day. And that, of course, in turn will have implications on the war in Ukraine and is being, of course, criticized by Europe. So, yes, this could have major implications, and it does appear that the Iranians have decided to use their potential control of the Strait of Hormuz and their capacity to disrupt global oil distribution to indeed gain leverage in the situation they are right now. So this could become very complicated economically, but also politically, because it's having very real implications as to how various large nations, China, India, are going to look at their own oil input in the future and where they want to import their oil from.
All right, James, thank you very much. Our senior reporter, James Andre.